Good morning, everyone. My name is Tyson Choptain. I am the president of the Prairies region for MSP Corp. And thank you all very much today for joining us on how to build a cybersecurity business plan. John and I will be talking to you today about some best practices for a cybersecurity business plan and why you want to build a cybersecurity plan for your organization. To start off with, I'd like to introduce MSP Corp a little bit. It's a name many of you probably haven't heard yet. Broadview Networks, over a year ago, joined a larger organization, MSP Corp, which is now over 400 people across 7 provinces and territories. And so we represent a very large number of different managed services providers across the country now. And up until now, we've been operating as independent business units. I am, again, as I mentioned, president of the Prairies region, as we're now actually regionalizing the organizations and working with Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta, which, many of us have considered the Prairies for a long time and have, a positive Prairies relationship with those provinces. So we're now part of a much larger organization, which provides for us additional talent pool and different buying power and a number of different time zones of support services. Today, I'm joined by John Martinuk. He is the manager of our security services. John comes from a storied background in both legal and with True North in the past. So he's got experience with security across a wide range of different types of businesses and disciplines. He is incredibly certified. I think he has more cybersecurity certifications than anyone else I know. And John and I have worked together for a long, long time as a client and as someone I worked alongside many years ago. So we've got a great history of working together, and we're so happy he's a part of our team. Myself, as mentioned, I was managing director of Broadview Networks. I am now the president of the Prairies region, so I'm responsible now for Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta. And I do act as a VCIO for some of our managed services customers. I still meet with customers on a regular basis, still stay very close to having a tight relationship with our customers, understanding their needs, helping them solution out their right results to the IT problems and challenges that our customers have. When we started doing security and we brought John on board and he really started to build out our cybersecurity solutions, we branded that as Broadview Secure. And it is a part of our organization, leveraging both vendor certifications across the Microsoft stack, CISSP-based certifications, both management, audit, and implement level certifications, CompTIA. We have a very well-rounded set of certifications, both just within Winnipeg and now throughout the organization as a whole. We work with a variety of different security vendors, implementing multiple different security solutions for customers. Before we get too deep into how you build the plan, I want to talk a little bit about why you build the plan. And some of this is likely going to be information a lot of you already know. This slide is a little dated. It is from 2021, but it is one of my favorite numbers to talk about cybersecurity and why we need it. And it's really a very good article about cybercrime. Because people think of cybercrime in many different ways. Not very many people who don't spend their time in the cybersecurity world realize just how large an industry cybercrime is. And just to be clear, it is massive. It is so large that likely by 2025, it will be 10.5 trillion annually, according to this article. You know what? We're past that already. It's expected now that by next year, possibly into 2026, cybercrime will be the single largest industry in the world. It'll be bigger than agriculture worldwide. It'll be bigger than oil and gas worldwide. That's how much money there is to be made, how much time the cyber criminals are spending trying to extract money from you and your organizations in one way or another. They're using a variety of techniques. They're using a multitude of different attack vectors, and they are just after money because it's easier to get that money than to go out and work for it the way all of us are used to working for it. The scariest part about this, in many countries where the cybercrime actors are operating from, the people that are perpetuating it don't even realize what they're doing is a crime. They go to an office every day, they work at that office every day, they spend time trying to get into systems, trying to engineer information about organizations, about people to compromise someone to get away, to extract money, and they don't even realize what they're doing is illegal. This one's really important to me as well, because one of the problems that we have, and we've seen over the last few years, is a lot of organizations really feel they're not the ones that are going to be affected by cybercrime. They're only going after the big guys. That is not the case at all. It is widespread, it is rampant across all different industries, all different sizes of customers. They don't care what size you are. They don't care if you're 2 people, 200 people, 2,000 people, 20,000 people. Actually, in a lot of cases, they don't go after the larger companies because they're more likely to have protected themselves better. And they're more likely to have more lawyers, better cybersecurity insurance, and better ability to deal with a cybercrime attack. It's the smaller organizations that are usually the most vulnerable and the least ready and able to deal with it. And so they'll go after them because the ability to hold you ransom, the ability to extort, the ability to get money out of you because of something they've done is actually higher, not lower, to the smaller organizations. And I want to make sure we understand we're talking about Canada here, because sometimes some of the information we hear is from other countries, other regions outside of North America, and we have to understand if it's valid for us. I want to present some statistics that are Canadian-based cybercrime statistics. Our score is 13th out of 75 countries. Now, that would make you think that's really good. 13th, okay, there's a whole bunch of countries below us. They're going to go after those ones. Well, yeah, except 13th means we're not 5th and we're not 2nd. And so there's still a lot of potential there for the bad actors. The increase is growing every year. It's rising every year. It is not lowering. We're seeing more and more cybercrime attacks every day. Over 85% of companies were affected in some way by a cyber attack. Whether you were directly affected because your organization was compromised or impacted, or one of your customers, suppliers, vendors, another organization you work with, someone that you work with has probably been attacked at least once, if not multiple times. There was some surveys done last year, and 65% of Canadian companies expect to get hit with a ransomware attack this year. Small business companies, not just large businesses. 11% of companies in the last 2 years paid the ransomware. Now, we recommend you never pay the ransomware, but the way you can protect yourself from that is having a good backup. We'll talk more about those things. The average ransomware cost to Canadian companies was $2 million to remedy. When you take the cost of downtime, the cost of recovery, the cost of business lost, all of that, and you add it up, even for a small organization, it can be a shockingly large amount of money. Sadly, we spend very little money on our IT budget in general, and out of our IT budget in Canada, we spend very, very, very little on cybersecurity. Even compared to our American counterparts, a similar sized company in America will usually spend more money on IT and more money on cybersecurity. So a lot of bad actors are going after Canadian companies and organizations because they know they're easier to hit than their American counterparts. 84% of companies have insurance policies against cybercrime. This data is actually 2 years old, and now that number is actually dropping because a lot of companies haven't put the necessary components in place to be able to keep their cybersecurity insurance. And if you look at your general business insurance, Often a lot of general business insurance plans now omit coverage if it's a cybersecurity event if you don't have cybersecurity insurance. 168 days on average to identify a breach. Just think about how long the bad guys are activating in your environment before you realize they're there. Over half of Canadians have experienced it in some way or the other. So just to put a frame of reference here, it's real, it's happening, it's not if, it's when. And a part of what we're talking about today is how you build a plan to prevent. But another important part is how you build a plan to resolve and remediate when it happens. So why is it required? And what should we be doing? Number one, if there's anything you can take away, I might say this a few different times. If there's anything you can take away from today, your business leadership needs to understand that cybersecurity is not just an IT responsibility. Buying tools doesn't build a cybersecurity solution. Buying wood and lumber and hammers, nails, tools does not build a house. You need a blueprint, you need a plan, you need to know where you want to be at the end of the journey, and then you need to buy the appropriate tools, solutions, and pieces to build that plan and put it into operation. It impacts your sustainability as an organization. It requires business policies and safeguards. It's not just about the IT tools that go in. It's not just about the antivirus software. It's not just about the firewall. That's the gate. That's the fence. People leave the gate open all the time. The bad guys are getting in. That's a responsibility of every employee. That's critical. The C-level, the executives need to understand what their security posture is. What is our risk? Who are we? Who's potentially coming after us? They need to be leading the discussion and they need to be funding the solutions. This is what they need to understand, because if you can't get C-level buying into this level, I can't probably help you. I can put pieces in place for you. John and his team can do amazing work. We're not going to be able to accomplish for you. You're not going to be able to accomplish for yourselves with your own teams if you don't have that plan. Cybersecurity insurance is a critical part of that plan. They're directly related. You have to build your plan to make sure you have the components in place so that you can qualify for cybersecurity insurance. You have to build your plan to understand that you need all the necessary components to get a reasonable cost for cybersecurity insurance. And cybersecurity insurance needs to be a part of your overall security plan because it's a part of how you're going to deal with incident response. It's a part of how you're going to get remuneration when something happens. So insurance is critical. It must be there. And like I said, most general business insurance doesn't cover you from cyber attacks. Having the insurance in there provides those safeguards for the organization and for the users. It helps with individual liability as well. It helps you understand your short-term and long-term renewal costs when you have a cybersecurity plan. So let's just go a little deeper into what we're talking about when we look at cybersecurity insurance policies and how they align to that cybersecurity plan that you need to have. We're seeing these kind of questions now. When we first saw cybersecurity insurance, it was, do you have AV? Are you patching? Are you backing up? Maybe it was like 3 or 4 questions. We have customers now that we've been filling out 30-page documents for their cybersecurity insurance. And I'm not talking 1,000 company or user companies. I'm talking 50, 80 user companies. Are the executives aware? Do you follow a security framework? What's guiding your cybersecurity decisions? Is it Joe down the street? Is it John because John knows cybersecurity? Or is it John or Broadview or MSP Corp or another organization because they subscribe to a framework like CIS, like we do? When did you last do a security assessment? Have you ever done a security assessment? Do you have MFA in place for all possible services? Do you have something to protect from zero-day threats? Do you have signature-based protection or anomaly-based protection? How good is your antivirus? And is it old school antivirus or is it modern anomaly-based antivirus? These are the types of questions we're getting. Do you have someone reviewing alerts from your systems? Are you monitoring your logs and what's happening on your network? Those bad actors that have been in your environment for 168 days, if you don't have these tools in place, you don't know that that's happening. You're not aware without 6, 7, and 8 that people are doing those things in your environment until they activate something. Are you patching your operating systems? Are you patching your applications? One of the best ways the bad guys get in is through vulnerabilities in code. If you're not patching, if you're running old operating systems that are unsupported, if you're running old hardware that isn't getting patched, you're likely more vulnerable to being attacked. Do you have daily backups of your data at a minimum that is stored off-site? Do you test those backups and those disaster recovery solutions? When's the last time you tested it? How well do you know if it's operating? And how much money did you spend on cybersecurity last year? This one cropped up a couple years ago and surprised us. They want to understand that the organization has a commitment to cybersecurity protection before they're going to give you an insurance policy to make sure that you're reasonably protected and they're not automatically going to be paying out money day one. Do you anticipate spending more, the same, or less than last year? That's going to have an impact. And so actions to take before you renew or apply for cybersecurity insurance to prevent a rejection, because a rejection limits many other opportunities for cybersecurity insurance. If you get denied or yours doesn't get renewed, some cybersecurity insurance companies won't even accept you applying if you've previously been denied. So it can be that bad. Have these processes, have programs and safeguards in place, get oversight, understand where you're at. Get someone to do an external vulnerability scan. One of the first things cybersecurity insurance companies will do is run a scan. They want to see if you've got vulnerabilities that are exposed to the internet. If you don't know that and you haven't done a scan, risk level is higher, you'll get turned down. Remove excessive admin privileges. Make sure you have MFA in place everywhere you can. Preferably application-based MFA. If it has to be SMS, it's still better than nothing. Have cybersecurity training as a part of your plan and a part of what you're doing before you apply. And then strengthen your posture with better advanced protection and monitoring. The more of these things you have in place and do before you apply for cybersecurity insurance or renew your current cybersecurity insurance, the better the plan you have, the more things you've executed, the better your renewal will be. Potentially, you'll lower your rates or keep them the same, or you won't get denied. Another important consideration of your cybersecurity business plan is privacy laws. Quebec's brought in Law 25. Canada has Bill C-27, which surprisingly hasn't been passed yet, but has a number of cybersecurity components to it. This is awareness we all need to have now. We need to realize what's going on. AI, it's coming in many different ways. You may be experiencing at an end user, ChatGPT and functions like that, but are you experiencing it from what the risk is of the bad guys using AI to come after you? So it is both a security threat and a security advantage. When you look at tools like Microsoft Copilot Security, Microsoft has AI fighting what the bad guys are doing. So AI we're seeing in both angles. We are seeing AI analyzing and attacking people without humans having to be involved. This is just going to ramp up the amount of attacks and the amount of compromises we see the bad actors doing. So I'm going to turn it over to John now to talk about how to build that cybersecurity plan. Oh, you're muted, John.
Thank you. Thanks, Tyson. Good morning, everyone. So one of the first questions we get, and probably the most common question is how does someone get started, right? Where do I start? I may have never had an assessment. It's been many years, or, I had an assessment and they dumped this 600-page document on my desk of what I should be doing. So it really starts with this high-level 3-piece process. This image on the screen ideally would actually be a loop because we want to show continuous improvement. Not just security, but the oversight, the governance, risk, and compliance that Tyson talked about. It really should be an iterative process of assess, remediate, validate, govern. But to simplify it, a really key in that first step is the assessment. And before you can do an assessment, you need to understand what framework is going to guide that assessment. So at a high level, we're going to select a security framework, perform an assessment, remediate those things, validate what we change is actually working, right? The security controls are working as they're intended, review them, monitor them, and repeat that cycle. When it comes to framework, there's probably dozens of them out there. I pick on probably the 4 most popular frameworks here. ISO is considered too expensive, cost prohibitive for many organizations. NIST is great, but NIST is typically used by US government and their contractors. PCI, payment card industry standard, it generally only applies if you're processing or storing credit card numbers. So we like to use and talk about CIS, the Center for Internet Security. I was watching a SANS webinar the other day. They actually evaluated a dozen plus frameworks, and they gave CIS the highest score, highest grade. We love CIS. We use it ourselves, so we hold ourselves accountable and we assess our clients against the Center for Internet Security. CIS has numerous benefits. It's a global framework, right? So the framework is created by security professionals from all around the world in different industries, legal, healthcare, manufacturing, and more. CIS is meant to be easily adopted and measurable. So all of the controls come from real world threats and boots on the ground. The controls are meant to be practical to implement. There's 2 levels of controls. So where security is more paramount, there's extra protections. The implementation and assessments are meant to be user-friendly, budget-friendly, and even better, and I don't have it on the slide here, the controls map to other frameworks. So for example, if you do a CIS assessment and your business needs change and you're dealing with a client that says, hey, I need to know that you're NIST compliant, I can take a CIS framework, map it to NIST or PCI or ISO or SOC, any of those, without basically reassessing from scratch. So the framework is also very adaptable. Cyber insurers love it as well. So as mentioned, we've selected CIS. Most of our assessments of clients is done against CIS. We can do one-time assessments. You can do ongoing assessments, but we'll talk a little bit more about the framework. So let's go to the next slide, and we'll talk about the controls in the framework. CIS has 18 controls. Within those 18 controls, there's over 153 safeguards that we typically look at. Sorry, Tyson, can I get you to bump that forward? Excellent. So as Tyson mentioned, right, in your plan, in preparing for cyber insurance, it's not just tools and technology, right? It's not buying 10 different security tools. It's evaluating the overall holistic organization, people, process, and technology. Being mindful of time, I'm not going to go through all 18 of these controls, but you can see, for example, technical controls, right? Securely configuring your assets, control 4. Monitoring, control 8 and 13. From a process perspective, right? Do you have an incident response plan? Control 17. From a people perspective, are you training users, right? Do you have a security training program? The number of safeguards that you assess depends on the implementation group that you choose to assess against. Another one of the benefits of this framework is, you can walk before you run, right? If you've never had an assessment, if it's been many years, if you don't know where to start, you can do what's called a implementation group 1 or basic hygiene assessment. It's going to look at 56 safeguards, and those are the things that every organization should do regardless of size, data, locations, etc. As you move into group 2 and group 3, you're going to factor, what's your maturity, right? Do you have security resources and budget? What's your risk? How many different locations are you operating? What kind of sensitive data do you store? If there's a yes to any of those questions, you really want to look at groups 2 and higher. So we do a bit of a risk profile of an organization. We select the group to assess against and perform that assessment. The CIS framework itself, that's just one of the pieces of the Center for Internet Security. The other piece are their technical benchmarks. CIS provides best practice configuration guidance for 200 plus vendors. So for example, there's a CIS benchmark for Microsoft 365. Again, this is input from around the world on preventing the most common attacks, and it's prescriptive, detailed recommendations, step-by-step recommendations for different products. Our most popular benchmark, and one we've assessed, probably 200 plus times, is the 365 benchmark. The CIS benchmark for 365 is going to cover overall 365 admin, defender policies, purview for data protection, loss prevention and labeling, Entra for identity protection, Exchange, SharePoint, Teams, Power BI, and the Fabric. So there's close to 100 different recommendations in those areas. They are technical benchmarks, but our report is going to provide you with a nice summary and your remediation to-dos and priorities. For every recommendation, right, we're going to show, did you pass? Do you need to remediate it? Should you review it regularly? And we're going to mark items for discussion. These benchmarks are really good, not just from a technical sense, but in a budgeting planning perspective. We can do a benchmark, and you could use the benchmark to help you develop your security journey for 365, to help you maybe procure a higher license to have more security in 365. Benchmarks exist for many different vendors and products. Probably our next popular benchmark is the one for Azure. So if you have any infrastructure in Azure, the benchmark is going to look at app services, disk storage, resource manager, SQL, Defender for Cloud, virtual machines, you name it. There's probably double the number of recommendations in the Azure benchmark. So we talked about holistic assessment of your environment using CIS. We've talked about technology-specific benchmarks. The other quite common assessment we do is privacy assessments. As Tyson mentioned, with some of the government regulations coming, right? It's really important for those handling sensitive data, companies that are responsible for their client customer data, right? Understanding what data do you store, why, what's it used for, right? Is that data for internal use? Is it shared with other organizations, right? What is the impact if that data is breached, right? If any of the data you're holding, if it's lost, stolen, exfiltrated, right? If it has the ability to cause personal harm, well, this is where impact assessment becomes really important. And you also are, under legal obligation to report those impacts to people's data. Generally speaking, the items I've talked about today, they could be done as a one-time assessment. We take a very different approach. So if you go back to that roadmap earlier, right, of assess, remediate, validate, oversight, right, that continuous cycle. In order to have that continuous improvement, you need to be continually assessing and reviewing. So instead of one-time assessments, as part of your planning and showing that you're improving over time, we take a continuous improvement approach. So our virtual information security officer program, which is myself acting as a complementary person to your internal teams, we can assess these items over time. So instead of one big upfront assessment, we're looking at numerous security related people, process, and technology items over a period of time. We're going to look at different items monthly, quarterly, twice a year, and annually. We do this in two offerings. So we have a plan for small to medium organizations. We have a plan for large organizations. All of these assessment tasks you see on your screen here, they're tied back to a framework. Everything we do as part of the ongoing assessment is meeting a framework's needs like CIS, NIST, ISO. Just to touch on these a little bit, like the CIS framework itself, there's technology reviews, right? So monthly, we're going to look at your 365, your on-premise Active Directory for indicators of exposure or suspicious activity. Quarterly, instead of, again, one time, right? We're going to look at multiple CIS controls every quarter. We're going to look at your 365 secure score for improvements there every quarter. Twice a year, we do a deep dive. We're going to look at your endpoints. We're going to look at your overall hygiene, right? What has improved over the last 2 quarters? Let's update your hygiene and scoring. We're going to look at people that have privileged roles and accounts. These are just examples of what we do at these cadences. If you focus on the larger plan and the annual cadence, again, it's more than just technology and tools. So we're going to help you develop a questionnaire for your vendors, right? If you're doing all this great security work and you have an external vendor with remote access that isn't holding the same standard as you, they're going to be your weakest link. So we're going to help you hold vendors accountable. If you don't have an incident response plan, we're going to write one. We're going to do a tabletop exercise. If you don't have security policies, we're going to help you write and update policies the year after. And tying back to the goal of this presentation to you, right? Regardless of plan, every year we're going to help you budget and roadmap to continually improve your security. So to summarize this slide, like I say, we can do one-time assessments, we can do an ongoing, we can be a complementary security member to your team. In addition to that, MSP Corp and our different security divisions, right, we can offer a multitude of services here. Some of these services have direct relation, right, to cyber insurance. As Tyson mentioned, right, if you don't clean up administrative privileges, if you're not doing external scans, the cyber insurers are going to be doing that. So you need to start doing it proactively yourself.
Thanks very much, John. So, the most important takeaways: leverage a framework, do ongoing assessments, look at the benchmarks and utilize those. Do you have someone certified overseeing what you're doing for cybersecurity? If you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Our email is solutions@broadviewnetworks.ca. If you already have an account manager, you can reach out to that account manager. If you have any questions, John and I will stay on to answer any questions. Thank you, everyone, very much for taking the time to join us today. We very much appreciate it.
Thank you.
If you have a question, you can certainly use the chat. That's one option. If you want to actually ask the question live, just say in the chat and we can unmute your microphone and or turn on your video if you like. We're open to all forms of communication. And as we're a tiny bit over time, if you just need to run, we understand that too. But yeah, please don't hesitate to ask any questions about the content you saw today or any other questions about our cybersecurity solutions and services. Okay, well, if no questions come up in the next minute or so, then we'll close off. And again, thanks everyone for attending. Really appreciate it. And don't hesitate to reach out to us if you have any questions. Oh, people just dropping off. Thought maybe someone had a question. All right, well, thank you, everyone. Again, appreciate your time, and give us a call, reach out to us by email anytime you want, stop us on the street. Don't hesitate to ask questions. For both John and I, cybersecurity is quite a passion. We never like to see anyone compromised. So the more we can do to help prevent that, the better. Thanks again.